This is my 4th Zwift race of the off-season, and all the races I've been doing have been anti-sandbagging races. There were 13 starters and 11 finishers. Of the 11 finishers that showed their age, there was one 20-something, two 30-somethings, three 50-somethings, and a 66-year-old. And that is me. Hey cycling community, this is Steve Grusis the Cycling Greek. Not only am I 66, but for the past 6 years I've been subject to AFIB attacks. In fact, I almost went into AFIB 2 days ago. I'll be talking about that in a bit. Usually within the first mile or so of the race, I can tell what the pack is going to be like. And this pack was one of the strongest packs I have raced in recently. In fact, we're looking at the first indication. Yusuke Wakibayashi from Japan just rolls off the front, and then people start to go after him. I also don't want to lose contact with the front group, and I figure I'm not as strong as everybody, so I am ramping up my speed just so I can get on someone's wheel, just so I have a chance to be able to hang with them. And so far it looks like I am. Make note of the gap behind me. I'm thinking that maybe there's a disparity between a strong group and a not so strong group, and so if I can stay with a strong group, then I'll have a chance to get a good result, much less be able just to hang with them to the very end, which has always been a challenge for me. Moments later, the others roll up and we regroup, so I'm figuring this has just been wishful thinking on my part. For the moment, I'm going to assume that everyone else is pretty darn strong. What I have to do is use as little power as possible, keeping in mind that I have to use a lot of power just to stay up with these guys. I look to accomplish this by focusing on 3 items. The first is riding on people's wheels. Easier said than done. There's a number of times in this race where I find myself to the side waiting for the algorithm to put me behind somebody's wheel. The second is when, after a surge has happened and now we're all getting back together, that when I make contact with the group, I have to back off sooner than what I've been doing because I'm using a few extra pedal strokes too much and I find myself floating off the front. The third is on the other end, when a surge is starting to take place. I have to make sure that I apply significant power early in the chase so I don't get gapped, therefore have to use a lot more power just to get back up to the group. The underpass tunnel that we're entering now is a special case. I'm applying extra power on the descent just to hope I can keep my position as we start to climb on the other end, so I can have a little bit of buffer and stay connected with the group when we get to the top. And so far it seems to have worked for me, at least this time. The main challenge for me in this race, setting aside of course that everyone else is a lot stronger than I am, is repeatability. Moving my picture in the insert lower left hand corner up a bit, you'll see my power profile. Pretty much I've been going in the red, dialing back a bit, going in the red, dialing back a bit, over and over again. So the question is, how long can I keep this up? With this group, I'm hoping to at least make it halfway. And halfway in this case is going to be about 5.1 miles. Right now we're at 1.3. A good example is happening right now. As we came out of the tunnel, Heathcote Pursuit attacked. Now we're applying power. We've been applying power for a little bit, then Vincent Caron took off after him, and it looked like it wasn't going to let up. As we started regrouping, I started letting up on the power a little bit. I didn't want to apply too much power for too long and float past these guys, and it looks like I'm floating past them now. I remember once during this race, and it's maybe the case now, where I decided to float off the front a little bit and then see who would come up to me. Apparently all I did was incite the others. So if you notice on the graph, earlier in the race, I would go up into the red zone and then I'd go down into the green zone. Now for the past few cycles, I would hit the red zone, but I'd never make it all the way down to the green. At this point, I know what I need to do to get some bananas back, but this is a race situation that may or may not happen. That being stated, I'm looking at the color graph at the bottom, and I'm seeing some green there. Maybe I'll get a bit of a break. This old guy's getting knackered. I look up at the mileage at the top, and we've only gone just under 2 miles. With the way I'm feeling, I'm starting to get concerned that I'm not going to be able to make it to the halfway mark. And the halfway mark is usually what I've been able to do in these races. But again, this is a pretty strong group. What I think I forgot to mention is that when I talk about making it to the halfway mark, I'm talking about making it to the halfway mark connected with the main peloton. Whenever I get disconnected, in other words, get dropped, I look to see who else got dropped recently so I can form a chase group and then do what I can to maybe catch up to these guys or just have a good workout. Oftentimes, I'm solo and there's no one around. There may be somebody that's dropped previously, and so now I'm trying to stay away from them. And then I'm also trying to go as hard as I can to see if I can connect with anyone else that gets dropped subsequently to me, but still close enough. I noticed near the upper left-hand corner that I've picked up a feather power-up. Usually I'm doing the anti-sandbagging crit races, and with the feather power-up, it's pretty easy to tell when I should be using that, and that'd be on the bricked cobbled climb. Over here in this race, in the circuit race, it's not so easy to tell. While the steepest climb is coming out of the tunnel, it's a short climb, and what usually leads into that is a downhill. So I'm thinking that's not the best place. It could be on the small riser that we're on now, or the low-grade riser I should say. It lasts for a little bit. There's also another low-grade riser on the other end coming in the other direction. I don't know. If any of you know what the best place is to apply the power feather up during the circuit race, please put it in the comments below. While I was talking about that, there was a big surge. Looking at the color graph below, that put me back into the red zone. Fortunately, I was able to dial back enough and not float to the front again, all for the purpose of saving energy. My next big concern is coming right up. The structure up ahead, that's a sprint point, and that leads right into a small climb. Should I be using the feather here or later on? I may not be around later on. And if you look ahead, somebody just popped out of using the ghost power-up. That is Matthew Mihalka. Rory O sees this and is thinking probably what everyone else is thinking, is that this guy's on the attack. So he puts in a lot of power, so then everybody's chasing after him, and look at me. Look at that big gap. It's looking like I can't do much more than 300 watts. So I keep at it. I'm hoping that these guys are going to slow down. And they are not slowing down yet. I'm looking at the graphics on the right, and I'm seeing that there's now a 1 second gap between me and them. I'm putting in about as much watts per kilogram as they are, but you know, they're in a bunch, they're going a little faster than me, and now that gap is up to 2 seconds. I'm not even 30% done with this race. So, again, I'm hoping that they're going to slow down. I noticed that there's a rider in the back of the group that's losing contact, and I'm hoping that I can catch up to him, but now I've seen he's worked his way up to the middle of the group. And there's a couple others. I'm hoping somebody gets dropped so I can have somebody to work with. I gotta back off for a bit. I can't do 300 watts anymore, and that gap is growing. So let's take the opportunity, since this gap is growing, and hoping that someone falls off and I eventually catch up to them, to talk about the almost going into AFIB a couple days ago. It all started on the weekend before. I had been doing squats and deadlifts during the off season, and this is like my 3rd week. And then for some reason I thought it'd be a good idea to do a 45-mile ride that had 4,700 feet of climbing in it. I sucked. I was with a couple others. Fortunately, they were going endurance and they were also waiting for me. But I had a hard time climbing. I had most of the hard time climbing in the beginning, because once I started to realize that I could shift my pedaling a little bit, things got a little bit easier. I could keep up with them and they didn't have to slow down for me a lot. So what I did was I took the focus off of my legs and started to initiate the power from my hips. Best way I can describe that is I would use my hips to throw my legs over the top and pull through at the bottom. Obviously I was still using my legs, but the emphasis was coming from my hips. After the ride, I hadn't realized how much energy that just sucked out of me. And so I rested. I had to do other things obviously, but I rested. And then Sunday, my plan was to go do this regular group ride where I ride an hour for endurance to get out there, and I'll get dropped by those guys because they're going pretty darn fast, and then I'll ride an hour endurance to get back home. Well, I didn't even feel like going. That would have put me over the edge. So I just slept in. Unfortunately, Sunday night to Monday morning, I had bad sleep. I almost stayed home from work that day. Then the next night, sleep was a little bit better, but not great. I was thinking I'd have to bag on my tempo intervals after work that day. I was able to sleep during lunch and I felt better, so I did the intervals. They turned out great. I met my power parameters and I felt real comfortable doing so. Problem came about a minute after that last interval. My heart started accelerating like it was going to go into AFib. I did this maneuver that often stops that from happening. This is where I stand up and I lower my head for about 10 seconds or so, and then when I raise up again, everything is fine. And so that's what I did. I did it while I was on the bike, but it still worked. I figure those intervals in combination with my lack of sleep and what caused initially this whole downturn to happen on that previous Saturday with doing all that climbing and my body just wasn't into it is what led to this possible conversion to AFIB. The next 2 nights my sleep was great, and so I'm doing this race today. Now, I'm not getting dropped because I had all these problems earlier in the week. I've gotten dropped because these guys are just a lot stronger than I am. But I'm not going to get faster back in this race after getting dropped. So I continue on and I just try to keep it steady. So I'm looking at the graphics on the right hand side and they are about 32 seconds ahead of me. So I'm thinking I'm just going to go and see if I can make it within a minute of them at the finish. Making a game of it will keep my motivation up. Jumping ahead to not too far long after, just past the halfway mark, those guys are over a minute ahead of me. So I'm thinking, all right, we'll make it 2 minutes. Jumping ahead again to the 7-mile mark, 3 miles to go, the gap is now 2 minutes. So let's make it 3 minutes. Maybe I can get in and not be more than 3 minutes behind them. Jumping ahead again to where I have 2.5 clicks to go, they are starting their sprint and they are about 2:40 in front of me. My legs are tired, but I have my work cut out for me. As soon as they finished the race, they went off the chart that appears on the right side of the screen, so I didn't have an idea how close I was to it. So we're going to find out now, was I able to break 3 minutes? And the answer is no way. I came in about 3:38 behind him. I always wondered how much I would suck in a race to not make a video of it, and at least I know that I could suck this much and still have a video. Afterwards, it was squat and deadlift time. Hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. Remember, watch that fatigue. Depending on the cause, AFIB can really put a crink in your lifestyle. As always, remember, comment, like, subscribe. The Cycling Greek.